And I will say this, as an administrator, never ever be afraid of going and working for a small community. Number one, you are going to be hands on with everything. I like to joke with people. I was the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker in this mile square community that had incorporated municipalities around us.
Yeah, okay, the Gentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation. Knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Gentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello, and welcome to the Jentry Podcast today. We have an incredible guest. I'm your host, Jonathan Mason, and with me today, I have Jesse Tice, who is the city administrator of West Bend, Wisconsin, and he brings a wealth of knowledge. He started in code enforcement, has done smaller cities, large cities, and everything in between. So he truly, truly brings so much experience, and I can't wait to hear his journey. But before I get too far into it, Jesse, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you today. And, I'm not a podcast guy. This is my second one ever participating in it. So I'm excited to see where this takes us.
Hey, I love that, and I feel honored to have you. You know, it's not every day that you can be on a podcast, but when you have the opportunity, I just say just let it fly. We'll see where this thing goes. So, as I always do, I like to just get a feel for West Bend. So, what's the special sauce? What makes West Bend the best place to live in the United States?
Okay, I'm going to start with the cliche first, but we are a small town, big city. There are really deep family roots here within our community, but then there are also new incoming families in our community. And all of that has really come together to form a city of about 32,000 people that really cares about one another. There's a lot of community involvement. There are a lot of civic groups, a lot of involvement within our school district, even from our standpoint with the Park and Recreation Department and participation in our programs. You see so much community coming together here in West Bend. That's really what makes us special. Being a city of our size at 32,000, as I mentioned, we have a little bit of everything. We have the retail, we have the commercial, we have the service, we have the industrial, we have the manufacturing, the hospital aspect of it, healthcare, and everything in between. We've got the small businesses downtown, the big boxes out by the highway, and all of the amenities that we can offer, we're really proud of. And it is that sense of community and that sense of pride. That's what makes us special. So again, not to be too cliche about it, but we are a small town, big city where we have that really that meshed citizenry, if you will, of the new and the existing coming together for the better of the community.
Love that small town, big city, and it's beautiful to see that you guys are able to mold different types of people and that came here at different times, because sometimes there can even be pushback from different community members that got to the city at different times. But I'm glad to see you guys are still holding that small town feel and making everybody feel accepted and appreciated. But I always say this, you can learn a lot about a city by learning about their leadership. So I'd love to know, like, what was childhood like for you? And did you always know you wanted to get into municipal leadership? Was this a foregone conclusion, or what was the journey like for you?
Not by any stretch. I actually grew up a small town of Luxembourg between Green Bay and Door County here in Wisconsin, kind of at the base of the thumb, if you will. If you look at a state of Wisconsin map, you see the Door County Peninsula, the thumb, if you will. So I grew up in a rural area, went to school, a small high school, and really the only foregone conclusion with that was both my parents, who did not attend college, pretty much told me, "You're going to school." Great. What for? Where should I go? You figure that out. Okay, fair enough. So, a lot of research and talking to my guidance counselor and teachers and whatnot, and just talking to my parents too and some friends. Landed at a small university in Waukesha, Wisconsin, Carroll. And being a country kid, being outside, playing outside, building forts in the woods and floating paper boats down the creek and, all that fun stuff. I'm thinking, okay, what can I do where I can have a job outside all the time? So I landed in the environmental science program at Carroll, thinking, okay, when I grow up someday, I could be a DNR warden where I can be out with the Department of Natural Resources in the woods, really helping to preserve wildlife and enforce rules and regulations and whatnot. And well, yeah, I married a city girl. So that career path detoured a little bit. That and when I graduated with my undergraduate degree in environmental science, the state of Wisconsin at that time was in a complete hiring freeze. None of their agencies were hiring at all. So frankly, my dream, my goal was kind of dashed right out of the bat, or right out of the gate rather. So, being a little bit old school, I took to the classified ads. What can I find? Because I really had it made up in my mind. I did not want to move back home. I love mom and dad dearly. I didn't want to move back home. I wanted to get out. I'm done with school, be on my own, do my thing. And I interviewed for a position as a zoning code officer with Dodge County. So that is a fairly rural county, southern mid Wisconsin, give or take. Trying to explain it for the larger audience here, whereby I traveled throughout the county and issued building permits on behalf of the county and inspected zoning violations and whatnot, making sure people were far enough away from waterways, making sure they weren't building buildings too close to septic systems, that kind of thing. So that actually was an amazing base for where I am today, because part of that was as a young professional, I had to communicate all of these rules and regulations with folks that were much older than I was, that didn't want to hear why they couldn't build a shed where they wanted to build a shed or what have you. So it was really about that, doing your research, being prepared to have a discussion, keeping it fact based. It's not about being aggressive or overly assertive, just explaining the facts of the matter and working through everything and being able to, frankly, take a little bit of verbal abuse as a young professional. Because again, here's some young kid telling them they can't do something they want to do. And that really helped give me a thick skin, so to speak, as I moved into my career, because with any leadership position, there's going to come with it, folks that don't agree with decisions that are made. And that is on you as a leader to discuss what is the baseline for that decision and take the criticism, if you will, and understand it and really just continue to work through the conversations. So that zoning code position really helped me grow as a professional very quickly, frankly, because I had to. I was out by myself on these properties in the middle of nowhere, Dodge County, Wisconsin, explaining rules and regulations to folks that sometimes didn't want to hear it. On the flip side of that, it was a joyous occasion when I could say, yep, everything is in line. You build that dream cottage you want to build. And folks were so happy to get their permit in hand, and they're going to sign the construction contract and build this dream vacation home they wanted to build. So, two sides to the coin there, but really rewarding overall. I did that for a couple of years, and then I switched over to a land use planning position in Dodge County. At the time, there was a law here in Wisconsin called the Smart Growth Law that required every municipality in the state to have a land use plan, basically a document that helps guide future decisions on the who, what, when, where, and why of the land use of a particular community. Are we going to put retail here? Is this going to be a residential area? Do we have to maintain a transportation corridor? What do we think about outdoor recreation, so on and so forth? So that was a neat experience too, where you flipped from that enforcement side of things. It was still an educational aspect to it because you're talking about land use and really trying to help people think forward. And I worked with a couple of townships under those projects, and that was just a neat transition because, again, it wasn't that enforcement aspect of it. It was more of an educational aspect of it and working with people to better their community for the long term. Did that, moved over to the village of Brown Deer, north side suburb of the city of Milwaukee. It was a dual role. It was planning and zoning. So the two jobs that I had in Dodge County were exactly what I was doing in the village of Brown Deer. And here again, just the transition from a rural setting to a metro Milwaukee suburban setting. And, how does this translate? But really, it was those core values, core competencies, if you will, that helped. It's taking the emotions out of it, staying fact based, having that thick skin and not attacking back, so to speak, when someone comes at you, and really just maintaining that level of professionalism. And so with that, I was in that role and I was in the community development department. I had my direct supervisor was the assistant village manager. He oversaw our department. Well, that gentleman left, took a job elsewhere as the administrator in a different community, and I happened to, of all things, that night go home and over dinner with my wife, sitting there chatting about it, and all of a sudden she just kind of stops, looks at me. Why don't you apply? Are you nuts, lady? What that just totally took me aback. Like that is not the vein I was in. I had no visions of getting into administration, but she sat there and we talked about this and this is one of the many, many endearing qualities I love about my wife. She makes me better. Bottom line, she makes me better. And she just explained how, think about this. You move into this role, you already know the community services department side of things. You work in that department. So if you're overseeing that, you understand that, you'll learn the administration side of it. This could just open up so much more for a career path for you. Like, yep, you're right. And so I went and spoke to the village manager about it. And he was like, let me give this some thought. And about a day or two later, he came back to my office and he's like, you know what? Are you truly interested in this? You give me a letter of interest and let's talk about this some more. And I ended up being promoted into that assistant village manager's role with the condition I go back to school for a master's degree. So I hold a master's degree from Concordia University here in Mequon, Wisconsin. I did that on nights and weekends while learning this new job. Young family, that was quite the challenge, but really rewarding at the end of it because not only was I able to have the flexibility of doing the nights and weekends of school, but at work, the village manager really made it a point of including me in everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. If it was a new development proposal, a meeting about that, I would sit in on that. My only job was to take notes and listen. I didn't have any other input there, but I was a part of the discussion. If it was collective bargaining or a disciplinary issue or a meeting about a neighborhood concern, I was always in those meetings, sitting, listening, taking it all in. And slowly I started being assigned more and more responsibility with that, where soon enough, I was leading some of these meetings. I was having those meetings on behalf of the village manager. So again, it really helped me grow in that administration vein. And from there, I'm like, okay, what's this next step? I want the big chair. I want to be the administrator. So I started looking around, and I was really upfront with my boss, the village manager, and explained, I think it's time. I really want to, grow, continue to grow. And he was 100% supportive. So I really can't thank him enough for that. But I applied for and got a job in Butler, Wisconsin. And I will say this, as an administrator, never, ever be afraid of going and working for a small community. Number one, you are going to be hands-on with everything. I like to joke with people, I was the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker in this mile square community that had incorporated municipalities around it. So there was no growth. You couldn't annex land. We were built out. We were what we were in the village of Butler, but there was so much community pride in that small community, in that we are not neighbor X or neighbor Y, and we're certainly not the city of Milwaukee that was nearby. We are the village of Butler. And it was amazing that 2.5 years I spent there. I did so much because, again, I had to be hands-on being such a small community. There wasn't the staff there. I mean, outside of the sworn police officers, was literally doing most of the things. And so that was such an awesome learning experience. And the accountability is there too, because everybody in that small community knows who you are. And so it is about being on your game a lot. So yes, a small community can be a bit stressful, but there's so much opportunity there to learn because, again, that hands-on aspect of it. From there, an opening came available in a larger municipality. I like to apply the rule of 10 to it. It was 10 times the size, 10 times the budget, 10 times the staff. However, it was an assistant city administrator role. So I applied for it, was hired, and I had people ask, well, why did you take a step back? And I'm like, well, time out. Maybe technically by title I did, but when you really stop and think about the size and scale of that community versus the mile square Butler, the city of Mequon provided much more growth opportunities. And also part of that job was being the human resources director. So that was additional growth opportunity for me as well. Enjoyed my time there. I served a quick stint, about 8 months, 7, 8 months as acting city administrator. When the gentleman who hired me retired, they did a national, I ended up coming in second. So I reverted back to my role, really helped onboard the new city administrator, but I had that taste. I wanted to get back to the big chair again. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I enjoy the accountability of, the buck stops here. You've got your policymakers being the city council or village board, wherever you may be working. You've got the residents, you've got staff. I thrive in that accountability. I appreciate the level of responsibility, not only the community, but staff and the policymakers place on me. And so that said, I wanted to continue moving forward. I moved over to the village of Grafton, just north of Mequon, a bit near along the Lake Michigan shoreline. So southeastern Wisconsin yet, but just continuing a little bit north of the city of Milwaukee. I spent about 9.5 years in the village of Grafton. We did some great things. That was a neat mid-sized community where I was a little bit hands-on yet, nowhere near what I was over in Butler, but I was a little bit hands-on, but there were staff, there were resources that could really take a ball and run with it. But there was still some of it on me to be directly involved. And that was continued my growth as a professional there, navigated, election results as far as a changeover in a governing board, a changeover in a village president, changeover in staff, and really building my team. It really gave me that opportunity to build out a team. And it was a neat experience to see kind of my vision come together over time. And it wasn't that it was forced on anybody or forced on the organization. It was gentle pressure relentlessly applied, as one of my favorite professors like to say, that really built out that vision. And I feel, in my opinion, maybe I'm a bit biased on it, left that organization in a great place. And I think they're going to continue doing great things. But yes, I've been here in West Bend about 9 months now. I came on board last summer, right after some torrential rains and some horrible flooding. So my Monday morning started in an emergency management meeting. Here I sit in a room with 45 other people saying, hi, I'm Jesse. I have no idea where the copy machine is, but I'm here to help. And so we've been off to the races ever since. A very supportive council, really looking at, a fresh set of eyes from the new administrator and what can we continue to do as a staff on behalf of the community to continue moving the city of West Bend forward. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how I grew as a professional, but really it kind of comes down to the roots of me growing up in a small town where it was about, you just helped out. The notion of public service never really stuck with me until fairly recently in my career. But I guess it was always ingrained because growing up in that small town setting, you always helped. If someone called and said, hey, I need help picking stones on a field, okay, sure. Yep, I'm free. I can go help. Someone called and said, hey, I need help moving, from one place to another. Sure. Yep, I'm free. I can come help. No problem. And so I guess that notion of service was always in there somewhere, but the true notion of being a public servant, I always looked at this as a career path that I enjoy the variety above and serving a community or providing for a community, but I didn't necessarily look at it as service until recently. But nonetheless, I've grown into the role, loving the wide variety of tasks I see on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's really what has driven me to continue this career path, just the sheer variety of what I may or may not deal with in a given day. How's that for rambling?
I loved it, Jesse. I appreciate the breadth of the story, and the one thing that I kind of take away is you were always ready for and prepared for the next step. Whether you had to take it by chance, or maybe your wife gently pushed you into the next step, but you were always ready, and I know that'll continue to serve you well, even when it's you just started in West Bend. in and you're in an emergency meeting. Just that always being ready is so important. So that definitely stuck with me, and I appreciate that. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I'd love to talk about the X's and O's a little bit. So, what are some of the strategic priorities of West Bend? What are some of the focuses now that you've been there just over 9 months?
Really, I'm still on the learning curve, learning because, as I mentioned, West Bend has a ton of history to it. There are some families that are here from the original industrial manufacturing developments that were the root of the city. They still have a strong presence here in town, and learning, you know, the community itself, getting to know staff and the nuances there, and frankly, getting used to the size and scale. This is the largest municipality I've worked in. And so, how I kind of described Grafton, my previous community where I served, as I was still a bit hands on. Here, it's quite interesting where, yes, I'm hands on, but in a different way. It's from more of a monitoring progress and providing updates instead of truly being ankle deep into the research or the physical logistics of something. So I'm adjusting to that role a little bit because I've generally speaking always been a hands on kind of person, and so I'm trying to figure out how do I fit into, the operations here. I came into a very, very strong management team who is very independent. They can function very well on their own. And it's a matter of making sure that I don't take that for granted, that I am still remain responsive to their needs and wants, and making sure that I'm actively engaged with them, despite the fact, yeah, they can function independently, no questions, and do very, very well. However, as the administrator, I want to make sure that they know I'm here for them. So that's just been an interesting nuance as I grow into this role, but really about how are we going to continue to move the community forward? Right now, I'm still in that vein of projects I have inherited and looking to tie those out, finish those up. There are a couple of new things that we've pursued since I've come on board. We were actively pursuing a grant to help fund a program that would facilitate relocation for professionals here to West Bend. It was an interesting proposal that we came up with where a private company came to us and said, we have this product and we can do this advertising and whatnot, and we can establish this incentive program. However, we need community partners to really help augment our efforts. So I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, West Bend Area Chamber of Commerce. I spoke with our city council, and we created, I'll call it this partnership, this triangle partnership of private private company, the Chamber of Commerce, and the municipality. And together we applied for a state grant, and we were hoping to receive this funding through this grant program to fund this program to kick off this public-private partnership to incentivize professionals to relocate here to West Bend. It was on us to advertise, why do you want to come to West Bend? Here's why. We can tell you all the great things, whether it's our park system, whether it's our housing options, whether it's our great school district, just our awesome municipality, clearly, all of those things. And then the Chamber of Commerce working with the business community here in West Bend to leverage that and basically advertise the openings that they have to, hey, you can come to West Bend and work for XYZ company. And then that incentive program would kick in. So just it's great to work in an organization where the governing body is supportive of kind of out of the box ideas like this, because we did not have anything budgeted. However, I went to the governing body at the city council and said, you know what, if we want to do this, and I feel very strongly about this, I feel the city should have some stake in the game. So I would request that we use some budgeted contingency funds to help provide some of this startup funding, because there was some capital coming in from private entities as well. And the majority of it would have been funded through this grant. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful at the grant, so we're going to have to make another run at that in the future. But that was a really exciting project for me to really kick off from square one and move forward and be supported by not only the community, but also the elected officials. And hey, being creative, helping our community prosper, absolutely, let's get after it. So yeah, right now it's kind of that transition stage for me of trying to finish off some inherited projects, which, are good things. We've got some redevelopments going, both residential and commercial. And that's kind of been my focus, is the economic development side of things right now, and tying that up. And then as I learn more and really get more comfortable within the organization, I'll look to, I guess, start applying my vision to the West Bend organization as the administrator. So pretty excited about that over time, but we're off to a good start.
That's awesome. And I love to hear how you are thinking outside of the box, and even more so how like you're connecting the dots from the Chamber of Commerce to working with the private sector, utilizing potential funds from the state to achieve what is necessary to keep supporting West Bend. And I'm pulling for you. I hope
Thank you.
the next time it comes around, you're able to capitalize on it. And that's such a big thing, relocation and bringing talent to West Bend. But that also touches on one of the biggest things that I hear on the podcast day in and day out, and that's housing. And across the nation, we hear different things. We hear there's a housing shortage or there's an affordability or attainability crisis, but it always looks so different in whichever municipality I'm speaking to. So if I'm not sure that they do, but if your community members had something to say about a housing challenge, how would they voice that, or what would they, or what do they say?
It would absolutely echo a lot of what you're hearing is the affordability aspect of it. And it is that ultimate push pull. I respect developers have their private business to operate. I get that. And they can't do it for free. I respect that. And it is that challenge of how do we as a municipality attract housing development and different options to frankly provide. If someone wants to come into West Bend and rent, we have options. If someone wants to come in and own, we have options. And those options are size, scale, price, whether it be rental market rates or ownership rates. And, how do we achieve that? And I'm happy to say right now, West Bend is sitting on approvals being in place for about 500 housing units over the course of the next couple of years as they build out primarily single family homes, but we have several multifamily and multiple duplex developments that are in the through the approval process, and the private builders are doing their due diligence now and getting their logistics in line to move forward with their projects. So it is about working to attract that variety of housing options. That being said, there are programs here in Washington County that do help with first time home buying and trying to alleviate that affordability concern. That is through the county themselves, not through the city. So there is some ongoing communications there. What can we do? We are the largest community here in Washington County. So if there's an ability to strike a partnership to address that affordability issue between the county and the city, I'd be all ears. And these discussions are ongoing. But right now, the programs are at the county level, but the city has made a conscious effort to look to attract various types of housing development to try to meet the various needs that are out there.
I love this, and this dovetails so nicely. So I definitely want to double click a little bit on housing, and I think I'm going to push you just to kind of get to some of the issues or the challenges and even opportunities here, to say it in a better way. So what is like the hardest housing type to get built right now in West Bend?
That's actually kind of a difficult question to ask because we have been really supportive as a community to all of these different types. We literally have I believe a 250 unit multifamily that will be breaking ground this spring to a 100 plus unit single family residential development that's going to be also breaking ground this spring summer. So that's kind of a tough question for me to answer because as a community, we have been very mindful of not everybody needs the single family home. Not everybody wants to rent. How do we strike a balance? And where do these different types of developments make sense? So it has actually been a lot of work from our standpoint as a community to embrace these different housing development proposals and look to strike a balance with them where, yeah, we have pretty strong standards here in West Bend, but we also understand the needs of the community as a whole or attempt to understand and meet those needs of the community as a whole. So yeah, I can't really, dive too much into that question as far as the difficulties because I guess what we're doing is trying to offset the question you just asked. So unfortunately, I can't dig too much deeper there.
It's quite all right, and that's a positive in my book. That all different types of housing stock are being or different types of housing types are being added to the housing stock. When you think about the process of development, sometimes I'll say the on the development community when a deal doesn't go through? What are some of the things that you're seeing? Is it the just the cost of actually materials and labor? Is it sometimes speed of permitting? Are there zoning variances that are needed that can sometimes slow things from the development community? Are there any things that they would say are challenges and or opportunities?
From the development community, I would say the challenges they've relayed to us are the cost of procuring land, just buying land in and around the city of West Bend, or I think I would almost argue almost anywhere. Just purchasing land to be able to develop. You know, the notion of that being affordable is long gone. So right there, there's a huge outlay from that aspect. But then, depending on where that land is, if they've got to start thinking about, extending utilities, water and sewer. If they've got to think about building out road infrastructure. So really it would be, I think those would be the primary two issues or concerns from the development community as far as acquisition of land, but then also the extension of infrastructure to serve that land. Because I feel for them in that they really can't start making any money. It is all outlay on their part until they start going vertical with houses and are able to sell said homes and lots. Yeah, it considering the price of land, it's difficult to see the small mom and pop developers, the small crews. You're definitely seeing much more activity out of larger home building companies. And so, yeah, I think it's that initial capital outlay for these folks that's really kind of preventing, progress, if you will. Because I mean, I stop and think about the neighborhood where my wife and I bought our first home. These were 1,000 to 1,400 square foot ranch homes, and it was this big old neighborhood, big city park, et cetera, et cetera. We're not seeing that type of development anymore because the builders need to get more bang for their buck with the home that end product they're selling. So it's these larger homes, which drives the cost because they have to cover their costs, and it's kind of this weird and vicious cycle, if you will, where honestly, I think, and this is my layman's opinion, as I am not a real estate developer in any way, shape, or form. If there was a way to build out a neighborhood very similar to the one I described where my wife and I bought our first house, I would assume, I feel strongly that I would assume that it would be snapped up very, very quickly. That these homes they're not the tiny starter homes, but they're not the big McMansions. They're just something really nice in between. You have the amenities of the sewer, the water, the sidewalks, the neighborhood parks. I would think that would sell gangbusters, but it comes back to that profit margin for the developers to cover their cost and then make a living. So it is definitely a interesting cycle here. And how do we break that? I'm honestly not sure.
Get that. So we've just dissected the issue from the community side, now from the developer side. Now I'd like to talk about from the West Bend and the municipality side. I'm not sure if you guys have like any municipal land or public land, but when you start to think about a site, if you do have public land, what are you looking at, and then what going forward to like the RFP stage? What do you wish you were able to know? Because then once you get the developer, you then have to figure out a way to come to a partnership agreement. What are some of those sticking points? And one of the things that you need to know even before getting to that point of negotiating of what the site will look like.
Absolutely. I mean, in switching gears a little bit, thinking of city owned property that we're developing, a project that I inherited was a city owned industrial park. And really, the discussions there about attracting businesses into that park and building that out really start with, and similar to the residential analogy that I just gave, really start with what is the cost of the land? How does that work? And one of our strongest bargaining points to attract new businesses is being able to, since it is city owned property, we can discount that land price and help facilitate a development. It is playing the long game, so to speak, because that new development is going to carry value, and that value is going to generate tax base, but over time. So that discount will get paid off over time, but again, it's more of a long game. There are limited tools here in Wisconsin as far as economic development goes. One of them is tax incremental financing, which we use readily here in West Bend to help facilitate costs or offset costs for developers, knowing full well that that new value is going to pay back, that incentive that we provide through the tax incremental financing district. But yeah, it is that land acquisition that is first, and then the utilities a very quick second. And then I think you start getting into nuances like how much parking do you need, or what about stormwater management regulations? How much of our property do we have to build a pond? Do we have to eat up part of our property, our acreage, with a pond? And then who owns the pond? All of these different types of nuances. But yeah, first, really, that big challenge is getting over that land acquisition hill.
That makes a ton of sense. So we've got to look at housing from all three different perspectives, and I appreciate that. I have one more question. It's not on housing, but after this, you'll be off the hot seat, and we'll shift into our last chance games. But what is the one thing across the municipality that keeps you up at night? And it could just be a challenge or an opportunity that at 3 a.m. just pops to your head, like I need to get this done.
There's a lot of things I actually have on my email signature line. Basically, I call it a work life disclaimer, where it's along the lines of, I am sending this email that is at a time convenient for me. I am not expecting a response, only that a response is, at your earliest convenience. Because yes, I will pop off emails middle of the night, Sunday afternoons, as something comes up and I think about it. Just communicate. That is the blessing and the curse of having a smartphone. But I think what keeps me up at night really is really continuing how to best look forward, not only for the community but for staff as well. Because it is about, you got to take care of your people. I can't do this alone. It is our staff of professionals, whether it's the police officers, the paramedics, the engineers, our planners, our finance folks, our clerk's office. All of them play such an important role in making this community go. How do you care for them as best you possibly can within the budgetary confines and policy restrictions that are out there? And it is, how do you retain talent? I strongly subscribe to the adage, train folks up where they're qualified to go anywhere they want, treat them well enough that they want to stay here. That being said, I can't always say yes. There are uncomfortable conversations, and really all I can do is continue to work to build that mutual respect, where if we have to have that difficult discussion and I have to say no about something, okay, I get it. I'm not happy about it, but we're going to move on as professionals and just continue doing our highest and best, on behalf of the community. So I think that care for the team, I think that's really what weighs on my mind the most, because we're all human. There are so many different dynamics you have to deal with as an administrator, and sticking within that staff vein. I've literally had folks come into my office and break out in tears because they were afraid to tell me that they were expecting a child. I'm like, that is awesome news. Why are you afraid to tell me this? Well, I thought you would be mad because I'm going to miss work for the FMLA period. Heck no, that is awesome. We will still be here. We will figure it out. Your family is expanding. That is amazing news. And it is just that human nature of really working to just be good to each other. Because if we're mentally healthy here, if we're good humans here, that translates to our service to the community and just our work product up to the elected officials in their decision-making process. So I think really it is continuing to think about how to engage with staff and treat them well, and continuing to foster a good, solid work environment. That is probably my primary concern. Operational things, emergency issues, we have a strong team. I have the faith there that we can come together and solve any problem that's put in front of us. But always comes back to that baseline of the people. The people make it happen. So that's where I look to put a lot of effort into.
I love that, and just it shows the leader that you are, the amounts of emphasis and intention and thought that you put into supporting your team. So I can definitely appreciate that, and I'm sure they do as well. So you are officially off the hot seat. We're now switching to our last chance games, and that comes from improv. So just think a quick yes and whatever comes to your head. I'm going to ask you three questions, and just the first thing that pops into your mind, say that, and then we'll circle back and give you a chance to explain or change your answer. So
Fair enough.
the first one is, what policy looks good on paper but is nearly impossible to execute in real life?
Policy that looks good on paper, but nearly impossible to execute. I won't say it's impossible, nearly impossible to execute, but a policy that's great on paper and does have an awesome function, but it can get logistically tough to track: remote work. Because we, as a municipal organization, we're a service entity. We're forward facing to the community. That, and there are different positions within our organization that just don't have the opportunity to work remotely. So striking that balance of who can, who can't, striking the balance of being readily available to whether it be the public or the elected officials, because being here in person is paramount to our service offerings. So yes, remote work is an amazing tool because we are able to balance, some folks can balance off, hey, I have this appointment. Okay, take that appointment. It doesn't make sense to come into the office, but you can still get some stuff done. Awesome. We struck a balance. Or I had a department head that I worked with. She unfortunately slipped and fell and broke her arm very, very badly. Okay. And she had to do it was not a regular PT schedule. It was because she saw different people to help her out. It was that bad of an injury. And so without that regular doctor's appointment schedule, we set up a system where she could work remotely and still do her PT, because some of it was actually online. She would dial in and they would give directions and she would do the exercises at home instead of leaving the office, going to do this, trying to get back to the office. It's like, wait a minute. Doesn't it make sense if you're at home, you're getting stuff done, you're readily available, and how do we structure that within the policies that we had? This was in my previous community in Grafton, and it worked out really well because it met her needs as a person who was healing from a bad injury, but she was also wanting to do work. This wasn't a matter of me being the bad administrator saying, you need to get back to work. No, she wanted to get back into the office and she was done with the primary portion of the care. And so she's like, hey, I want to come back to work, but I need some help here. And we figured it out. So remote work in that case worked amazingly well, but then there are times where, to be perfectly frank, remote work is very easy to abuse. Are you actually working remotely or are you doing the laundry? So it's one of those things that is amazing on paper and can be an amazing tool, but you do have to use it wisely and judiciously as far as the actual implementation of it.
Nice. Yeah. No, I think that it is a tough one, and then even down to by the person. Like certain people are great at remote work. Other people are doing the laundry.
Well, and I know, and I'll speak for myself. I couldn't. Maybe I could do 1 day a week remote work. I need to be here. I need to interact with people. I would find other things to do at home. And I can speak for myself. Remote work would not work for me. Now, I've got friends of mine. They're in IT and they absolutely thrive in the remote work because they don't have the noise. They can just concentrate on their network IT stuff and they can get so much more product taken care of and done. I'm the opposite. I need to be here in the office, in the environment, so I can interact and have that structure.
This next one, I think I may know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the most common hidden development constraint? Utilities, ownership, cost, or politics?
Generally speaking, it's the cost. Politics will always play into it because public sentiment plays into the politics. And if there are very strong feelings in the community about we don't want to see X, well, the political decision will be driven by those constituents. So I think those are all challenges, but I would probably say a responsible developer who comes in and broaches a concept and takes that temperature has a decent feeling as to whether or not it's a go, no go from a political standpoint, but then it's that acquisition and infrastructure cost aspect.
Makes a ton of sense. And what is the biggest long term risk you cannot address in a 2 to 4 year election cycle?
Biggest long term risk that you can't cover in a 2 to 4 year election cycle. Well, I think it's actually something we're working through here in Washington County as far as being a county that has a mix and match of, municipalities, incorporated municipalities and unincorporated townships, where it is how can we work through and bolster the fire and EMS service system? Because we've got existing volunteer departments where folks will respond to the call and go. We have career full-time departments that respond to the call and go. And how do you strike those balances and provide the service in all of these different types of areas, with the funding constraints that are out there for municipalities, but also, quite frankly, finding the qualified individuals. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not one. I don't want to run into a burning building. I don't have the gumption to, respond to somebody who is severely hurt in a car accident on a day-to-day basis. I appreciate what our firefighter paramedics do, day in, day out, because I know I'm not built that way. But it is, how do we foster this system for the long haul? Because the paid on call model, the volunteer models, the interested qualified people just aren't there anymore. But these rural areas cannot afford a full-time department. So how do you strike that balance of marrying up resources, having agreements between communities, and then the funding aspect of it? So in 2 to 4 years, that isn't something that could be solved, within this election cycle. That is something we can make progress in these 2 to 4 years, but it's such a long-term issue that it's going to be around for a while. So I would say that would probably be front of mind right now as one of the foremost long-term issues.
That makes a ton of sense, and it's so important to be able to get those services out to the people that need them, no matter what type of community and what that makeup is. So that definitely is a longer term challenge, but very important. Now, my final question is a three-parter, but it's all based on the same question, just based on differing degrees. So the first question is, with an extra $100,000 added to your budget, what role would you add, or what challenge would you tackle? The next one is, with an additional $1 million added to your budget, what challenge would you tackle? And the final one is, with unlimited money, unlimited staff, unlimited whatever you need to get the job done for an entire year. What challenge or initiative would you tackle?
But with 100K, I think from a infrastructure standpoint, I would look to kick off our play structures in our parks really kind of get replaced year over year. One in this park this year, one in this park the next year. See if we could get ahead a little bit. So if I have a one-off 100K that I could invest, I would say let's see if we can jumpstart that playground replacement program with an extra one, and just kind of build some momentum from there. If I had 100K and applied it towards staffing, I would actually keep that within our park and recreation department, just to bring on another body to assist with programming. Because here in West Bend, we have a really strong community interest in the recreation program offerings, whether it be swim lessons or archery or fishing or soccer. A lot of interest from the community, and it is about meeting those demands. So if I had that 100K year over year from a staffing standpoint, it'd be a park and rec staffer, program coordinator. If it was on a capital side, it would be in the park and rec as well, but playground facilities. $1 million. Roads. Let me stress one more time for effect: roads. Wisconsin has a lovely freeze thaw cycle. Winters are harsh, summers are warm, and roads just get beat up. They don't last. And we've got, last I checked, about 550 lane mile of road. here in the city. And yeah, we've got to get caught up on some of this. We've reprioritized over the years where we've done some residential streets because we've built in a lead water service lateral replacement program where from the main, there was back in the day when these houses were built, it was a lead pipe from that main serving the water to the house. Well, as we know, lead and water is not a good thing. So our efforts over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years have kind of switched from large main roads to some of these smaller neighborhood streets, but we've compounded that project with, yeah, we redid the road, but we also got rid of these lead water service laterals. So, with a swing of $1 million year over year, I would push that back more towards larger roads and put a focus there while maintaining the existing funding in those smaller roads and lead lateral replacement. So I'd be able to kind of have my cake and eat it too, if you will, with regards to road replacement, because we'd be doing small neighborhood streets and those lead water lines, but also some of these larger major road projects that need to be addressed as well. And then unlimited, boy, oh boy, I can't even fathom that. It would really be about putting even more resources into the maintenance of our park amenities. It would be more about putting resources into our people. What more can we offer our people? you know, how can we make a bigger push on getting caught up and staying caught up with roads and the quality thereof? Boy, oh boy. I'm kind of at a loss. Pretty good question because I couldn't even fathom there's so many things there that would be amazing to do with unlimited funding. But in not to downplay your question, but that could never be a reality for us because we're funded through taxpayer dollars. So literally that would mean as an administrator, I'm telling our policymakers levy monstrous property taxes on our residents to provide us these funds. So yes, you could do great things with those funds, but it literally and figuratively comes at a cost to our residents and businesses. So, I kind of struggle with that question because there's that push-pull dynamic.
Can definitely understand that. So it sounds like a lot of roads and parks, playgrounds, facilities, and or staff. But I think those are very important, and it sounds like that's what the community is asking for. So you are officially off the game show seat, and you made it through the hot seat. So Jesse, thank you for taking the time to be with us. But any last just bits of knowledge for our viewers before we close out here?
No, really, at the end of the day, just be a good person, regardless of what seat you sit in, whether it's me as an appointed administrator overseeing the day-to-day operations on behalf of the elected officials, or an elected official or a staff member, or, John Q. Public, just be a good person. And that's going to get us so much farther in this world if we can work together to really come to, in some cases, agreement, in other cases, a good compromise where both parties aren't necessarily 100% happy, but there's progress to be made. And, it comes down to that. Where can we meet in the middle on some of these things and just continue to do good and move forward?
Just be a good person. And I think that it's simple, but so important. And Jesse, on behalf of everyone here at Gentry, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you sharing your time and your knowledge and your journey with everyone. And then to the viewers, thank you so much. We appreciate you very, very much. Again, I'm your host, Jonathan Mason, and Jesse, who tuned in, is the city administrator of West Bend, Wisconsin. Thank you, and have a great day.